It's time for the best coverage of the top stories in sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
Welcome to Tuesday. I'm Jason Page. Bill Bender's coming up in about 15 minutes from the Sporting News. He'll hang out with us, talk some college football. Contender Pretender Tuesday is back. Odds and ends. See Wemby get blocked last night? How do you block a guy who's got a wingspan of like 17 feet? I don't understand. But it happened last night.
Coverage of the top stories in sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
Welcome to Tuesday. I'm Jason Page. Bill Bender's coming up in about 15 minutes from the Sporting News. He'll hang out with us, talk some college football. Contender Pretender Tuesday is back. Odds and ends. See Wemby get blocked last night? How do you block a guy who's got a wingspan of like 17 feet? I don't understand. But it happened last night. But we'll talk some NFL in this show, and that means our friend Sam Yarnell is here to talk some NFL with us and college football from last night. NFL from last night, Monday Night Football, in particular with the Jets and the Chargers doing battle at the Meadowlands. And I got to be honest, Sam, we talked about it yesterday on the show. We broke it down. I liked the Jets in this game. I said 19-3, 19-6. And basically it was the reverse of that with the Jets offense unable to do anything. The Chargers offense didn't do much more, but they get a special teams touchdown, and Zach Wilson is Zach Wilson, and you wind up with a Chargers win and a bunch of head scratching when it comes to the Jets, and now trying to figure out what this team actually is. Are we back to where we were in week 2 or week 3 with regression for Zach Wilson, where we're asking ourselves, can this team, win 7 or 8 games? I don't know.
Yeah, run the tape back, edit the tape in right here of what I said yesterday, because it happened to a T. We both took the Jets, and the Chargers came in and blew them out. The exact score that you were trying to remember was 19-13. There was no chance of that happening by the end of the first quarter. This game was so much worse than I thought it was going to be. The Jets threw up all over themselves. A team that we had really sold ourselves down the river on just came out and laid an absolute egg, almost to the point that we haven't seen them do yet this season. It was bad, Jason. We're not giving the Chargers credit here. They did not beat a good team by any stretch of the imagination. I'm glad that regression to the mean finally rolled around for the Jets, and we can stop talking about them actually contending for the playoffs or the AFC East or Aaron Rodgers coming back, because it's all over for them. And last night felt like the nail in the coffin.
Couple of things. One, I could think about Joshua Dobbs getting dealt at the trade deadline for a 6th-round pick from the Cardinals to the Vikings. And then I'm sitting there asking myself, the Jets couldn't do this? The Jets couldn't do it. They couldn't do it in the offseason when there were a plethora of quarterbacks available. They couldn't do it now before the trade deadline, and now you're stuck. You're stuck with Zach Wilson for the rest of this miserable season for this team. I thought Troy Aikman said it brilliantly in the postgame with SVP. He said, look, the Jets are a bad football team with a good defense. That's exactly what they are. They're a bad football team with a good or even great defense. And we saw that yet again last night. And now, last night they could have won a game at home against a Chargers team that's leaking oil, get to whatever it would have been 5-3, and put themselves in a position to potentially win the division. And you go out and put that kind of effort on the football field last night, they could spin it any way they want. They could say anything they want, and Robert Saleh could try to paint the, pie in the sky picture of this team still being able to compete, and there's still a half a season left, all he wants. But at the end of the day, what we saw last night was the Jets aren't serious. They're not a serious football team. You cannot be a serious football team with Zach Wilson as your starting quarterback. And I've tried to give the guy the benefit of the doubt. Can't do it.
I would love to harp on a name that you just mentioned, Robert Salah. If we'll go back to before the season started, and Jason and I were talking about who should be the first coach on the hot seat or this season, I said it was Robert Salah. And
why do you call him Salah?
He said it when he was first asked how to pronounce his name. That's what he said in some New York media day, something like that. So that's just what I've always run with. Anyway, to the coach. Last night, he got straight up outcoached by Brandon Staley. And Brandon Staley's offense is not as talented as Robert Saleh's defense at the end of the day. It's objectively true. You look at guys like DJ Reed, who quite frankly should contend for an all-pro look as a defensive back this season. They're loaded from front to back on that Jets defense. This is 2 seasons in a row that Robert Saleh has had a championship defense and a game-managing offense and has done absolutely nothing with it. He's throwing up nothing burgers like it's his job. Woody Johnson has to step in at some point, and I don't know why he hasn't already.
Yeah, he's going to give him a pass. He's going to get a pass because of the Rodgers injury. They're going to listen. It's obvious what the Jets have already made the decision to do. They're just going to wipe this slate clean and come back with Aaron. Look, I know. We could sit here and do this all day, but the fact of the matter is they will come back next year with the same team and hope for a different result based on the fact that Aaron Rodgers will be the starting quarterback of this team. That's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to do.
And it's so frustrating because if they actually tried to progressively get better, the AFC East would be, 3 absolute dogs and the New England Patriots. That's what that division could be. But instead, you have an absolute dog who's not having a great season, one of the most electric college football teams in history, just slightly worse than mediocre Jets, and the New England Patriots. So I just am so tired of these systems in New York, and it seems like this is like the 3rd one in a row where they've got a very talented team, and they just cannot progressively get better. There's no progressive change that happens in the franchise at all. And one thing goes wrong and you haven't made changes behind it enough to back them up. It's so frustrating.
Nathaniel Hackett's going to stay because they got Nathaniel Hackett to coach Aaron Rodgers, despite how bad this offense has been this year, despite the fact they haven't been able to make any sort of adjustment to compensate for the fact that Zach Wilson is the quarterback. They have not figured out a way to make it work, and they're just gonna sit tight, and we'll see what the Jets are next year. That's it. And look, I mean, at the end of all of this, they still could make a run to the postseason. I think it's unlikely, but they could still make a run to the postseason. But let's not fool ourselves. Whether this is a 3rd wild card team or a team that winds up with the 10th or 11th pick in the draft because of the fact that, they're just good enough to not make the playoffs, but just good enough to not get a great draft pick or one of those top 5 or top 6 draft picks, which is what you should do when you lose Aaron Rodgers for the season. They should have tanked. But when you make the decision not to do that, you wind up where the Jets are. And now we'll see what they are next season. For the Chargers, this was a big win, by the way.
Nah. Was
big
it?
Win for listen, win on the road in the NFL, travel cross country, you take it. You take it, especially against a good defense. You get a special teams touchdown. By the way, the Jets have given up 4 special teams touchdowns in the last 2 years. The rest of the league has given up 3 punt returns for touchdowns. I just want to make that clear for anybody who's looking to find a scapegoat for the Jets to fire. How about the special teams coach?
It's always the special teams coordinator, isn't it? It just always seems to be. The Bills did it too in like the 2nd year of Josh Allen's career. It's always the special teams coordinator. I think the Commanders did it when Kirk Cousins was the quarterback. They were the Redskins then. To the point though about the Jets, if they play games like they played last night against any team, the rest of the season, they're not going to have a chance at the playoffs. It's as simple as that. You cannot play like that You cannot put that product on an NFL gridiron and expect to win enough games to make it to the playoffs, let alone win in the playoffs, because you'll run into a good team there and they'll just destroy you. But even against bad teams, when you play the way the Jets did last night, it's not going to get it done over the course of the season.
Here's the thing, though. The remarkable reality of the Jets is this, Sam. They are 4-4. The Bills are 5-4. The Jets already own a tiebreaker as of right now over the Bills. The Dolphins are 6-3. The Jets haven't even played them yet. So you have the Jets that are a game behind the Dolphins on the loss side and tied with the Bills. The whole season, the Jets still basically control their own fate 9 weeks into the NFL season, which is remarkable to think about when you consider they lost Aaron Rodgers, obviously, in game number one, in drive number one of the season. They still control their own destiny. So if Robert Saleh wants to, still feel good about this team or try to sell optimism to the fan base, he can, because they control. Everything is sitting right in front of them as of right now, if you're a New York Jets fan. The schedule going forward for the Jets, they have the Raiders in Vegas this week. It's a winnable game. I don't think they will win, but it's winnable. They've got the Bills in Buffalo the following week. I think we know how that's going to turn out. Buffalo's out for blood. Home for the Dolphins, home for the Falcons, home for the Texans. Then at the Dolphins, home for the Commanders, at the Browns, at the Patriots to finish out the season for the Jets. At the Browns, at the Patriots to finish out the season.
I've got a hot take.
Oh, boy. You stopped. Do you do this just to annoy me?
Yes.
Do you really just say I've got a hot take?
But no. It actually isn't that hot, and it's a reasonable scenario. So I want you to picture this, Jason. I think we're only going to have one AFC East team in the playoffs this year. I think the Jets and the Bills both are going to be like kind of sort of 9-8, 8-9. I think both of those teams are going to end up about there. And I think the Miami Dolphins are going to be the only AFC East team that makes the playoffs this year.
I'm looking around the rest of the league, though. What makes that argument tough is there's going to be attrition in the AFC North. The worst team right now is 5-3. You're going
to get 2 AFC North teams at minimum.
You'll get a division winner and one wild card. Okay, fine.
At minimum.
Yeah, one wild card. You might get 2. You might get 2.
Very realistic possibility.
I'll tell you what I could see. I think you're going to get 2 out of the North, 2 wild cards out of the North, and 1 out of the East. That's what I think. You're not going to get one in the South. You're not going to get one in the South. And in the AFC West right now, the Chargers are 4-4. That's your second best team. And I don't necessarily, and there's still a bunch of games left to be played in the division there. I don't think so. I think it's going to be 2 out of the AFC East, and oh boy, he's getting ready to do a little ASMR here.
The Houston Texans.
Not happening. You can wish that all you want. That's not happening. It's not happening.
This is my car salesman pose.
Yeah, it's not happening. They're 4-4, and they lost to Carolina. I'm done with the Texans after they lose to Carolina.
They're a 2013 Camry with 175,000 miles on them.
Yeah.
They might make it to that finish line. They might just.
Yeah, I don't think so. Next year will be a good year for them. Guys are going to want to come and play with C.J. Stroud. I'll tell you that much. All right, Bill Bender's coming up on the other side. Let's do some college football. Rolling along on this Tuesday edition of the Sports Wrap. Take a break from the NFL. We'll come back Contender Pretender coming up at about 15. But first, love to bring in our man Bill Bender from the Sporting News. He does a terrific job on all things college football. Hangs out with us today on the program. We'll get into the college football playoff rankings, everything that happened in Week 10. But first, Bill, got to talk a bit about Michigan. Obviously, you know, they've been a topic of conversation with you and I almost every week, it feels like, for various reasons. Now you've got the NCAA informing them they might take action against them for the scouting and the sign stealing and all of that. To me, you know, I watched Jim Harbaugh's latest press conference. And as much as they're saying they're taking on this villain role and we're going to, the WWE and Ric Flair's there and all that stuff, I see a guy that's just getting worn down and run down by having to answer these constant questions about all things not related to football. I see a Raiders team that needs a head coach, and Jim Harbaugh's been friendly with the Davis family for a long time. I add it all up. I say after this year, this guy's gone. Am I nuts?
We'll see. I mean, I was told last week that it was a matter of days that an extension would be offered. So the question with Harbaugh is, will he sign it? Now, I've been in a lot of Jim Harbaugh press conferences. His press conference demeanor has always been hard to read, hard to normalize, hard to figure out. So I don't take too much from that. But to your point, I think this is wearing on everyone. I think it's wearing on Michigan. I think it's wearing on the entire Big Ten. I think it's a cloud over the commissioner's office. And you're supposed to be celebrating the fact that you have this Penn State-Michigan game on the Big Noon Spotlight. And I'm guessing a large chunk of that will be spent talking about Harbaugh. And it sounds like where we've arrived is, I think the Big Ten wants to, we talked about this last week, the Big Ten wants to suspend him for some length of time. Maybe 2 games. Maybe it's not even that long of a suspension. And I think Michigan's prepared to dig in and fight it. And this latest story about the sign stealing that was going on with other coaches collaborating against Michigan is only going to make things worse.
Yeah, I get it. And, you know, it's, yeah, again, to me, if you add it all up, you know, there was this talk, and I heard the same thing you did about the contract extension, and, you know, lo and behold, it hasn't happened. And everybody's sort of holding their breath right now to see what happens next. I also wonder if I think where this story potentially turns is what the sign stealer reveals. I mean, if this paper trails back to Jim Harbaugh in any way, shape, or form, he's done, isn't he?
Oh, for sure. I mean, and then he would maybe head off to the NFL, to the Raiders. And I always talk to people. There are certain people that can be the villain, and there are certain people that can't. Jim Harbaugh can.
Yeah.
He is capable of wearing the black hat and doing all and riding out the rest of this season. And there probably isn't a better Raiders coach, to be honest with you. I mean, in terms of persona. And
I don't know. You don't think Dion? I mean, I've got to be honest.
Dion
the Dion
would be
thing,
even better.
You know, I've thought about Dion landing there as well.
I remember having a discussion last January with some people in the industry about why I thought Dion would be a perfect fit at Georgia Tech. And when they were looking for a coach, and then being from Atlanta and his Atlanta legend and all of those things. And I think the results would be what he's done at Colorado, but a little bit better. Now, granted, Georgia Tech's 5-4 right now. They've done a nice job. So, but to my point, like, can J.J. McCarthy wear that black hat? Can that entire Michigan team wear that black hat? Sometimes with college kids, it can become a distraction where you're so into being this villain that you can lose focus. And that would be one thing I would be concerned with Michigan as they go into Penn State. I mean, certain teams can wear that. The U used to be able to wear that. Alabama can wear that. They certainly don't care that everybody hates them. They're like, if we were doing like a Marvel comic thing, like Alabama's not even really a villain. They're just them.
Caleb Williams' tears. A lot of people made a big deal of that on Saturday night after the loss to Washington. And, a lot of people said it's because, hey, he sort of realized this was the end of the road. Some people are saying, hey, he should just sit the rest of the season, keep himself healthy for the draft. What did you make of what we saw with Caleb Williams on Saturday night? And some people would argue, oh, if he's crying at this level, what's going to happen in the NFL? I tend to look at those people and say, you're fools, you're clowns. This is still somebody who's, just out of his teenage years, who's obviously feeling some emotion at the moment. I didn't have a problem with the tears. What did you make of all of it?
I mixed for me, because I don't have a problem with anybody showing emotion into all the hard work that they've put into this game. And obviously a tough loss for USC and losing by 10. I think if he could just get into the locker room, though, you avoid this. And that's the thing. Or maybe the TV camera could avoid this and just leave it be. And I know that's maybe protecting the player a little bit.
Yeah, you got to tell the story. You want the camera. You want the camera
right.
to tell. You want the camera to tell the story in that spot. I don't have a problem with the cat. I don't have a problem with the cat. It's a powerful moment to see that raw emotion.
For me, and I was talking about this, and we were talking before I came on. My son had a rough game in lacrosse this weekend. He's a goalie. He had a rough game, and afterward, I could tell he was a little shook. So we did the Dion thing, honestly. We walked together because I didn't want him to be embarrassed with his friends. I knew he was probably going to tear up a little bit. So we walked together all the way down the field and then all the way back and calmed him down. And that's one way to handle it, right? So with my son, I always tell him, the cameras are still always on. They're always on at youth sporting events because you don't want to become that person that becomes viral, whatever.
Yeah.
But how many of those you see from a youth sporting event? So for Caleb Williams, I get it. He was overcome with emotion. He went to his mom. I have no problem with any of that. I just think when you put yourself in that position, which he did, there's going to be a fairly large portion of people that think that's either over dramatic or they're going to pick at it right or wrong.
How crushing is the loss for Notre Dame to Clemson? I think we talked about it last week on the show. You're like, hey, don't overlook Clemson, even as bad as they are. And in the back of my mind, I'm not going to lie, I'm going, my God, this Clemson team sucks. And then I'm sitting there watching my TV going, is this really happening right now?
Right. I think we're past the honeymoon with Marcus Freeman. And this is part of the job description at Notre Dame, is that you have to play in big games. You can't use we played in too many big games as an excuse. They lost to Ohio State because of a coaching error. They lost in part because of a coaching error. They lost to Louisville. They weren't ready to go that night. They had played 4 straight primetime games. I get it, but they weren't ready to go against Louisville. And this one, they weren't ready. There's no way they were prepared for this game. When you fall behind 24-7, you throw the pick 6, you run into a team. That's life at Notre Dame. They play a lot of big games. You can't go around saying, we'll play anybody on our schedule and be this. They've done that their whole life. And even in this new environment where they won't be in the Big Ten or the SEC, I think it's fair to put a little bit of pressure on Marcus Freeman in these big game scenarios. I love Marcus Freeman, love his demeanor, love the way he coaches that team. But you got to win big games at Notre Dame. And ask Brian Kelly how that goes. He can tell you it's tough.
Yeah, it certainly is. Hey, Bill, what do you expect when the latest college football rankings come out on Tuesday night? I don't see any reason for all that much change. Do you?
No, they may pull a couple moves for TV purposes, as they so often do. So by saying that, maybe Georgia bumps up to number 1, maybe. I think they wait a week till they beat Ole Miss, then they bump them up. I think the top 4 will remain the same. I think Michigan will remain a topic of conversation. They're going to ask them again about Big Ten punishment, and they're going to give the same answer until we all have some resolution there. And then the top 10 will probably be the same. So I don't. One thing, and it's small, they need to be able to get James Madison in a bowl game.
I just was going to ask you about that. I'm glad you brought it up, because I was going to actually ask you about that. They're making this plea to the NCAA, and do you sense there could be a reversal on this?
I hope so, because I mean, it's not James Madison's fault that they're having this much success with the transition. I understand some of the reasoning for it. I also understand there's 41 bowl games that people love to complain that these things are meaningless, but it would mean something to those James Madison players. It would mean something to those Jacksonville State players and Rich Rodriguez and the job he's done there. So, yeah, I think James Madison should at least be ranked. You're going to see Liberty be in the top 25 tonight, and the rest of it will be pretty boilerplate from 1 through 11. And that top 11 teams, if they put Louisville 11, which they should do, those are the 11 teams to watch as we get into the final 4 weeks of the season.
Let me ask you about Dion in Colorado. Another loss. They changed the play calling. They put Pat Shurmur in there. And, you sort of watch the way this team performed again this week. They got to win 2 of the next 3 in order to be bowl eligible. I don't see it happening. Is there anything that leads you to believe they can win 2 of these next 3?
Well, the problem is they're not going to beat Utah. I think we can agree on that. They could beat Washington State. Washington State struggled down the stretch here. So it really puts a lot of pressure on this game at home against Arizona, who has emerged as one of the most fun teams to watch for those of us who stay up late at night and watch Pac-12 after dark. Arizona's been great. Noah Fafita the last 4 weeks over 70%. They've won as an underdog 3 weeks. They've played a tough schedule. Jed Fish has done a fantastic job with that team. So, I mean, this is the week where Colorado, if they're going to make a bowl game and go 6-6, they have to have this one, and that's not going to be easy. I do think it's going to be another fun game, though.
If Washington loses another game, do we really run the risk of a Pac-12 team not making the playoff?
We do. And I think there were some people in Columbus and Tuscaloosa and places like that were rooting for Washington to lose to USC. They may have been crying next to Caleb Williams because they didn't. That the Pac-12 that was a win that the Pac-12 needed, whether we want to admit it or not. It's crazy that this system, the best conference this season that has provided the most entertainment and probably the best offensive play, is the one that might get penalized by the format.
When's the new playoff system start again?
Next year.
And then we'll eliminate all of this. Yeah. One more year and we eliminate all this while we're eliminating the Pac-12. It's perfect timing.
Exactly. So get rid of them and go from there. But this is that time of year where if you're one of those 11 Power 5 teams with 1 loss or less, you get kind of your TV guide out because you're rooting against other teams.
Yeah, it's crazy. Bill Bender does a terrific job on all things college football for the Sporting News. I always appreciate it, my friend. Be well.
Hey, no problem. Thanks so much for having me on.
Rolling along on this Tuesday edition of the Sports Wrap. Thanks to Bill Bender for hanging out with us from the Sporting News and talking some college football. Breaking up the monotony of an NFL Tuesday and my conversation with Sam Yarnell. Odds and ends in about 15. But let's talk some more NFL. Let's bring in back our guy, Sam Yarnell, for a few minutes. There he is, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm your guy.
My guy. You're my guy.
I'll take it.
Yep. You're my TV husband. There you go. I have a bowling husband. I have a TV husband. There you go.
Your real husband's going to get jealous.
Yeah, he probably will. It's all right. He's used to it by now. So, let's do a little contender pretender, Sam. It's Tuesday, and that's typically where we would do this. So let's do a little contender pretender, shall we?
We shall.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about contender pretender. 3 contenders, teams we think based on week 9 that could be potential contenders for either a divisional playoff spot, a wild card spot, or even the Super Bowl. And then we'll give you 3 pretenders. Start with the contenders. I'm going to go with the Cleveland Browns as a contender. Not just a contender, but a contender to win the AFC North. No Deshaun Watson this season for a good portion. A stout defense. I don't even think this team has played complete football yet. And even with all that said, they're 5-3 and just a game out of the division. I think you have to put the Browns right now as a contender in that division. If Deshaun Watson plays even to 75 or 80% of the Deshaun Watson we used to see in Houston, I think the Browns are actually a contender to win that division as of right now. The Baltimore Ravens, not just a contender, but a contender to win it all. Right now, the Baltimore Ravens have to be considered a Super Bowl contender with the way they're playing. If you put them on a neutral field with the Kansas City Chiefs, I mean, what are you making the spread? 2.5, 1.5, a pick? I don't know. But I feel really good about the way Baltimore's playing. And I'm not a Lamar Jackson guy. I never have been. I'm one of those people that thinks you could win a lot of games with him. You could even win a playoff game or two, even though he's really kind of struggled in the playoffs. I think with this team this year, they can go a long way. I think they can go all the way, quite honestly. They have the best defense in football right now, and that is nothing to sneeze at. Plenty of weapons on offense. I love what Gus Edwards has added this season. Zay Flowers has been a nice addition. Great pick in the draft for that team. If they stay healthy, why isn't this a Super Bowl contender? You tell me. The Minnesota Vikings, playoff contenders. Wild card contenders. As long as, and there's a caveat here, as long as the Pastronaut, as he has been affectionately named by our own Sam Yarnell, as long as the Pastronaut continues to start. If this team deviates from that, if they decide to go a different direction at quarterback, if they go bring in Nick Mullins off the injury list and make him the starting quarterback, all that goes by the wayside. As of right now, with Josh Dobbs as the starting quarterback of this team, as a guy who has not even had an opportunity to get the playbook down yet, the Minnesota Vikings, after the 0-3 start, have to be considered a playoff contender. Now to my pretenders. This is easy this week. The Seahawks are a pretender. Wow. The great pretender. At 5-4, they have a point differential of -4. They kind of feel like the Vikings of last year, where everybody likes to look at them and think, Geno Smith and Pete Carroll and rah, rah, rah. The Seahawks aren't for real. They're a pretender. Even if they make the playoffs, they're not a contender for anything. They're a pretender, which goes the same for the team that follows the Seahawks on my pretender list, that being the Dallas Cowboys. Oh, my God. Anything beyond a one-and-done playoff team, the Dallas Cowboys are. Here's the funny part. With about 6 minutes left in what would eventually be that loss in Philadelphia, I actually would have had the Cowboys as a contender, as our friend Sam Yarnell can probably testify to, because of the fact that I was texting him vehemently denying this idea that the Cowboys were incapable of making a run here. I thought the Cowboys were capable of making a run. But then I watched the final few minutes of that game between Dak Prescott stepping out of bounds on the 2-point conversion, the play calling on that final drive, the play to end the game, Jake Ferguson at the goal line even prior to that. All of it adds up to me. The Cowboys aren't for real. They can't be, look, they're kind of like the Miami Dolphins in that they can't beat anybody good. That's kind of a problem when you get to the playoffs, because you got to beat good teams to advance in the postseason. My last pretender, pains me to say this because I love their head coach. And I think he's one of the great head coaches of this generation, not named Andy Reid or Bill Belichick. Mike Tomlin's Steelers are not a contender. They are a pretender. They're not even a wild card team. They might be the fourth best team at 5-3 in that AFC North right now. You know why? They don't have a quarterback you can trust. Kenny Pickett, for all of his late game heroics, I think he's had 7 or 8, fourth quarter comeback wins, game-winning drives, this sort of thing. All of that's great, but he's not consistent enough. And you cannot rely on constantly having to come from behind late in games in order to be a good football team. I think they're really good defensively. But I think they're just too inconsistent offensively. And Kenny Pickett, as long as he's the starting quarterback for that organization, they're kind of going to be stuck in mud offensively. Combine Mark Canada in there as your offensive coordinator, whether he's calling plays on the sidelines or calling them up in the booth. I don't really care. The Steelers are pretenders. Sam, it's all yours.
Just going back through my notes, Jason, because let me preface my contender pretender with great minds think alike. 4 of our 6 are exactly the same. I've had the Ravens in my contenders 4 times this season, and the first time was week 2. They will find themselves back in my contenders, and they'll lead off my contenders. The Ravens are Super Bowl contenders. We took them to win the AFC at 6-1 live on the show. Hope you tailed that, already being offered a positive cash out on that bet. The Baltimore Ravens are a good football team. They're not a great football team yet, but I don't know that there is a great football team in the NFL this year. And if you put them on the gridiron with anyone in the league right now, might take the Ravens. That's right now. We've got to remember that this is still going into week 10. Early in the season comparatively. A lot of season left, but the Baltimore Ravens have shown this entire season that they can overcome injuries and they can win football games. The Baltimore Ravens are Super Bowl contenders. The Minnesota Vikings are playoff contenders, just like Jason said. They could win 3 of their next 4 games with ease. The Pastronaut, I can't take full credit for that name. It's because Josh Dobbs is an aeronautical engineer. That's what he studied while he was at the University of Tennessee. He's a guy who had internships with NASA. Now he's throwing moon balls in one of the more talented offenses in the NFC, maybe the most talented behind the Niners and Eagles. That takes us to my last contender, the San Francisco 49ers. We cannot forget about this team. They were on bye this week, and it seems like everyone's ready to write them off in the NFC because they lost 3 games in a row headed into the bye. This is a time for them to get right. I'm not saying that they're going to win the Super Bowl, but the San Francisco 49ers can easily contend for the NFC Championship game. My pretenders. As Jason said, the Cowboys and Steelers are easy pickings, and those are the first 2 on my list. The Cowboys have so many flaws throughout their entire team. It's like a piece of Swiss cheese, and the biggest hole may be that their best cornerback is missing. But at the end of the day, you're never going to win meaningful games with Dak Prescott. I said it on the show yesterday, he is not a quarterback who can win the big game in this league. Mike McCarthy's a decent coach. Jerry Jones is a little bit crazy still. But that shouldn't hold the Dallas Cowboys back from being as good as they could be. What is holding them back is Dak Prescott under center. It can't last much longer. I don't know why they continue to trust Dak Prescott. It's what's keeping them on the pretenders list. The Pittsburgh Steelers may be the most fraudulent 5-3? Are they 5-3? 5-3 team in the NFL right now. They have an incompetent offense. Their quarterback, who has very, very small hands, clearly cannot play the game at this level. And otherwise, they're wasting away some amazing weapons in Jaylen Warren and George Pickens. The defense is electric, and it will carry them to an 8-9, 9-8 Mike Tomlin textbook season. But the Steelers are 100% division and Super Bowl deep run at all pretenders. My final pretender, and this is one that Jason and I have gone back and forth about off the air. The Jacksonville Jaguars are pretenders. They are not going to win the AFC South. I hope you have your money in on the Houston Texans to win that division. I know I do. They're going to lose 3 or 4 of their next 5 games. And when they do, they'll find themselves right around 500, and it's going to be really tough if they lose that game that I believe is week 13 or 14 against the Houston Texans. They're going to be looking up at Houston in that division. The Jacksonville Jaguars are AFC South division champion pretenders. They they may make the playoffs. My contenders for the Super Bowl, it's the Ravens. For the NFC Championship game, it's the Niners. And for the playoffs, it's the Vikings. My pretenders for the AFC South Division crown, it's the Jaguars. For the playoffs altogether, it's the Steelers. And for any sort of run, it's the Cowboys.
I'm going to agree with you that the Jaguars' schedule is tough. I just think they're better than you think they are. Their schedule is tough, though. I mean, they're 6-2 right now. They've got the 49ers. That game is in Jacksonville. They have the Titans. That game is in Jacksonville. Duval. They are at Houston. Home for the Bengals. At the Browns. Home for the Ravens. You know what the interesting thing is? All their toughest games are at home. All their toughest games are at home.
And they're way worse at home than they are on the road. Both of their losses this season have come at home.
At the Buccaneers, home for the Panthers, at the Titans. So that's the remaining schedule. And look, in a doom and gloom scenario, could it go really bad and they wind up winning 9 games this year? It could. It could. Because I think that's the worst case scenario. Is this a 9-8 team? Even if you think that the last 9 games of the season they're gonna go 3-6, which I don't think is the case. I think worst case is a 10-win team. Worst case, it's a 10-win team. Even with that schedule,
they struggle at home. They've struggled at home this season. I think that there is a chance that they go into that Carolina Panthers game late in the season, week, 17 or 18? I'm sorry, 16 or 17. I think there's a chance they go into that game at home against the Carolina Panthers, who have already pretty much locked up the number 1 overall pick at this point, and lay an absolute egg, needing a win, and that somehow the Panthers have the number of the AFC South this year.
They have the Panthers at home and then at the Titans to finish.
Right. So I'll bet they'll beat the Titans at the Titans because they win on the road like nobody's business. They are the London Jaguars after all. But they struggle at home. They struggle in Jacksonville. There's a real chance they lose that game to the Carolina Panthers.
Not losing to the Panthers. They're not losing to the Panthers.
Clip this. Play it back. Week 18.
Look at my face. They're not losing to the Panthers. You want to say they might lose to the Titans? Will Levis? You want to argue that Baker Mayfield does something amazing? Fine, have at it. They're not losing to the Panthers. There. How's that? And boy, the bye came, by the way, at the perfect week, at the perfect time for them, because they can get healthy. They had a chance to get healthy with Trevor Lawrence in that knee issue I think he was dealing with. So it's good time.
That Niners Jaguars game this weekend, that's going to be very meaningful for both of those teams because the Niners need a win. Both teams coming off a bye. I'm going to put the third mortgage on the over in that game.
What's the spread on that? Let's take an early look at the line for that Jaguars game. Jacksonville +3. Oh my God. Give me home
Lay
dogs.
the points.
No.
Lay the
Give
points.
me home dogs or give me freedom. Oh my goodness. Give me home dogs.
Gosh.
Give me home dog. Where's the Penguin? Hold on. Yeah. The Penguin.
Sam Darnold
Penguin
would
says
beat
take-
the Jacksonville Jaguars by 3 points in that offense. I would just like to go on the record and say.
Give me Jacksonville +3 all day. +136 on the money line. Where do I sign?
What's the total?
45.5.
Over. That should be 48. That is an over.
I don't think so. I think
That
that's
is my
an under.
best bet. That's
I think
my
you and
best
I
bet
are
of the
looking
week.
now. I don't think so.
We
I
can
think
do
that's an
Page
under.
versus the Prince right now.
Oh, I don't think so. I
The
think that's an
Niners
under.
might put up 48 points on that Jaguars
You're
defense
crazy.
alone.
The Jaguars defense is so good.
It has carried them to their 6-2 record. I will say that.
They haven't even played their best offensively yet. That's still to come.
Trevor Lawrence doesn't have a best offensively.
Dude, in 8 games this year, they've scored 193 points. That is hardly pedestrian. I got news for you. If you look at them in the conference, they're right around the average. Teams they've scored more points than, your Houston Texans, by the way. They've played 1 less game than the Chiefs. They've basically scored the same on average as the Chiefs, if not more. And there's a lot of teams that they've scored more points than that we would consider good football teams. They've scored more than the Patriots, scored more than the Jets. I couldn't even say that with a straight face. All right. That's going to do it for Contender and Pretender. When Sam and I return, odds and ends, we'll wrap things up quickly. I promise. Don't go anywhere. The Sports Wrap continues on this Tuesday. At the risk of making New York sound like it is the center of the sports universe, some odds and ends to wrap it up today. Daniel Jones done for the season. The knee injury against the Raiders, we all saw it. I don't know what it means for the Giants. You know, you're still going to owe him all this money. I don't know what you're doing at the quarterback position the rest of the way. They'll be lucky if they win 2 more games this entire season. That's why when everybody was going nuts about the Raiders win, it was funny. They all just conveniently left out the fact they were playing the Giants with Tommy DeVito at quarterback. Like, come on, seriously? What do you do if you're the Giants right now, Sam?
Cut. Eat all the dead money, suck for another year, draft a quarterback in 25.
It's hard to do that in New York. I know it sounds easy, living in the Beltway like you do in D.C.
They do it unintentionally like every 5 years.
Yeah,
Come on.
but you gave fans a taste last year when you make the playoffs. You beat the Vikings. Fans were excited coming into this year. Maybe unjustly so, by the way.
What if, and hear me out here.
Oh, boy.
Joe Shane walks into the owners' meetings this offseason, or the GM meetings, whatever, where they all take the funny picture together.
Sure.
And he makes a deal with Brandon Beane of the Buffalo Bills. Kyle Allen and Sean McDermott straight up for Brian Daboll.
With you. Why are you trying to pawn off Kyle Allen on us? We don't want Kyle Allen. Please. You're not getting Brian Daboll back. It's not happening. Actually, I could see if they ever got rid of Sean McDermott, I could see Brian Daboll being the head coach of that team.
Oh, he will be. He'll be the next head coach. Because the thing is, and just like Craig Counsell did with the Brewers, he'll walk away from one playoff team to go to a slightly better playoff team with whom he's more connected with the players. Brian. My assumption is Brian Daboll will be the next head coach of the Buffalo Bills.
Number 4, Michigan State loses to James Madison. Tom Izzo loses to his nephew. Wow.
The epitome of brutality, as John Rothstein says.
Wow. It's pretty bad. The New York Yankees and their owner, Hal Steinbrenner, well, they talked to former players, Nick Swisher and Andy Pettitte, before deciding whether to keep Aaron Boone or not.
Oh, that organization's such a mess. I'm so sorry you have to root for him.
I have no words. I have no words for the dumpster fire that the Yankees are.
The Nationals are currently in a better spot than the New York Yankees.
Oh, stop it. Now, you always go one step. No, take that back. Like 5 steps too far.
No.
5
Hear me
steps.
out.
There is no hearing out when you tell me that they're in a better position than the New York Yankees.
From a managerial perspective, they are. From a prospect perspective, they are. From a front office perspective, they are, especially because I just heard a rumor from, I think, Jim Bowden this morning that the Nationals are looking to hire Theo Epstein as their president and CEO. So that would be awesome.
They might be looking for him. They might be looking for him. I don't think Theo's interested. Not in them necessarily, just in general. I don't think he there's a lot of teams that have come calling for Theo Epstein. He hasn't gone to any of them. He could have been with the Mets. He didn't go to the Mets. With Steve Cohen as the owner who's willing to spend money. Yeah.
I think that's because you look at his history, right, especially recently, and he likes projects. He doesn't necessarily like a team that has a bunch of stars, and he doesn't want to come in and have to deal with those big egos. He likes a team that's got a ton of prospects that are really highly rated, like the Nationals do. He comes in and makes a few moves off the top and turns them into a contender very quickly. I think it's the kind of build that Theo Epstein, at the very least, likes to utilize usually. I don't know how realistic it is. I don't think it may be at the end of the day, but I will stand on my point that the Washington Nationals, where we sit right now, across baseball, when you look at all the aspects that go into being a Major League Baseball team, the Washington Nationals are in a better spot than New York Yankees.
You're insane. You are absolutely delusional.
I would also bet that the Nationals win a World Series before the Yankees do. But
I wouldn't bet that. I wouldn't make that bet. LSU, number one women's basketball team in the country. They lost to number 20 Colorado last night. Their head coach, Kim Mulkey, said they lack toughness, and she made it very clear that film study they do, not going to be a fun one. No, it couldn't happen to it. Couldn't have happened to a nicer woman, by the way. Kim Mulkey. God, talk about hot garbage. Did you see what she was wearing last night? Who's that crazy hockey guy? Don Cherry? She looked like a female Don Cherry last night. She looked like Don Cherry with a wig on last night. Can I say that? I think I can. She looked like Don Cherry with a wig. She's every bit as ignorant as him. Gosh. So it actually all matches up. Angel Reese wasn't doing this last night.
At the end of the day, Angel Reese is she's just so mad that Caitlin Clark is so much better than her at basketball.
And Caitlin Clark had like 28 and 7 last night in her opener.
Iowa
LSU ranked
just
third in the
continues
country.
to wishes they were. Yeah, LSU wishes they were Iowa. That's the problem. Because as much as LSU is, they have the accolades, they won the national championship.
Absolutely.
Right. LSU's never not going to be a football school. Right now, Iowa is a women's basketball school.
It's
and
true.
Angel Reese knows that. Their coach knows that. And you can just tell how sick it makes them all. Just like Nebraska. Nebraska's a volleyball school now. They packed out the football stuff.
Yeah.
Like, that must make the football players sick. I'd enter the transfer portal the next day if I found out that this school that pitched me when they were recruiting me on being a football school is all of a sudden switching their allegiance in sports. And don't get me wrong, that we should make Nebraska a powerhouse in women's volleyball now. And if I were a women's volleyball player, I'd want to go to Nebraska with everything in me to be in that atmosphere. But at the end of the day, you can just tell that that's the problem with the LSU team is they're never going to get the support. They're never going to get the backing because they're not like these other schools that have these generational women's basketball players where the football team sucks so they can focus more on the women's basketball team and the generational talent they have there.
Hey, Sam, you know what the music means? It means the show's over. We got to go. It's okay. You can't hear it. It's fine. It's going to wrap it up for us. We're back on Wednesday. Well, I'm not back. The ghost of me might be here, but Sam Yarnell hosts the show on Wednesday. Thank goodness for that. Otherwise, there'd be no show on Wednesday. Simple as that. I'm back on Thursday. Enjoy Sam tomorrow as best you can. Sam, any last parting words? Although I think you just had about 7 pages worth of final words there.
That was my speech to end the show, Jason.
We'll see you back here tomorrow.